Welcome back everyone, it is Eric from Rare Candy, and today we're back with another Scarlet and Violet deck profile, but this time we're going to be taking a look at MeWe Max and updating it for the brand new post-rotation format. Now, usually anytime a rotation happens, we very frequently see decks that were very good previously kind of get knocked down a tier or two, but MeWe Max is actually very fortunate in this rotation to not really lose a whole lot that really hurts this deck, but in fact, it actually might even gain a few new cards that could make this deck even better. And before we do get into the meat of this deck today, just a heads up guys, if you are planning on buying any Scarlet and Violet cards for yourself, friends of the channel over at flipsidegaming.com are still taking pre-orders on sealed product. You can use coupon code RARECANDY for 10% off, and you'll get free shipping too. And Rare Candy's patrons not only had early access to this Mew deck list, but also have their own exclusive discount code to save them 15% off instead. Or alternatively, if Flipside is out of stock by the time you find this video, you can also use my affiliate link with TCG Player. They'll find you the next cheapest listing online, and it really does help support the channel too. Links to all this stuff will be down below in the description. But with that being said, let's check out the deck list. So of course, up first we have our 4-3 MeWe Max line. For a quick refresher, Mew does have the Cross Fusion Strike attack that allows us to copy the attack of one of our bench Fusion Strike Pokemon and use it. So most of the time we are just going to be copying the attack that we have on Genesect, but we also can copy the Max Miracle attack on a bench MeWe Max that will allow us to cut through effects on our opponent's active. But speaking of Genesect, of course, we have our 4 copies of Genesect V, the backbone of these MeWe Max decks for that Fusion Strike system's ability, which allows us to draw until we have cards in hand equal to the number of Fusion Strike Pokemon we have in play. But Genesect also does have that Technoblast attack that does 210 damage, and then we can't attack with it on the next turn. And the last Pokemon we have in the list is just going to be a single copy of Oricorio, just to reduce damage to our Fusion Strike Pokemon by 20. Really standard stuff for playing for MeWe Max. I see no reason to change this Pokemon line. Definitely more of the changes that we have here today are going to be in this deck's trainer cards. We do have 3 copies of Judge up first. This is definitely going to be our primary supporter that we want to use. This is not going to be, as you can see, a version of Mew that plays Fusion Strike Energies and Elesa Sparkle. We want to just keep spamming Judge that allows both players to shuffle their hands into their deck and draw 4 cards. So normally this sort of draw supporter would be a little bit, mid if we're just being honest, but the 4 cards we're getting isn't even that big of a deal, of course, because we can just keep refilling our hand with our Genesects after we have set both players to a 4-card hand. But as we get into the late game, we want to shy away from Judge and lean a little bit more on Roxanne. So of course, Roxanne can only be used once our opponent has crossed that 3 prize card threshold, but then both players shuffle their hands into their deck, we get 6, and our opponent only gets 2. But we do have a new supporter entering into the mix, and that is going to be 1 copy of Arven. This guy is going to allow us to search our deck for a Pokemon tool card and an item and put them into our hand, which honestly is awesome. This guy basically acts as an out to a 5th Battle VIP Pass, a 5th Power Tablet. I think a lot of Mew decks previously would probably use this slot for something like a Silene, and I kind of viewed this as like the inverse of that. It's kind of like Dowsing Machine versus Computer Search and Expanded. If you guys want to prioritize having repeated access to some of these resources, maybe you do just go back to Silene, but Arven definitely makes your deck more consistent and allows for more explosive plays. From there, we just have 2 Boss's Orders to round out our supporter cards just to switch our opponent's active with one of their bench Pokemon. As for our stadium cards, up first we have 2 copies of Lost City in the deck, and even though I think at a glance Lost City does seem a little bit weaker after rotation since we're losing Ordinary Rod and it's going to be more difficult for decks to get repeated use out of Drapion, I think there's still a number of instances where this card is still good. Decks like Lost Box still only play like very thin lines of their attackers, and being able to send maybe their only 2 Sableye into the Lost Zone is still really good. Or if we want to look at the new Gardevoir EX, if we can start aggressively just knocking out Crowias and Ralts and sending them into the Lost Zone, that might really cripple our opponent's late game. But we are also still playing 2 copies of Path to the Peak as well. It's still funny to me seeing this card in MeWe Max since Mew notoriously hated running into Path for the longest time. But this card is very, very good against a number of different Pokemon out there. I just mentioned Gardevoir EX. It is going to shut down that powerful ability that allows them to get energy into play. It's going to shut down Miraidon EX, Radiant Greninja, etc. And the games where we can go Judge Path and have that stick and our opponent not be able to bump the stadium, it's just such an impressive combo. For our Pokemon tool cards, up first we have 2 copies of Forest Sealstone, which of course has kind of become a staple of Mew VMAX at this point, since while attached to one of our Pokemon V, we can use this V-Star power to search our deck for any card. This is just another way at guaranteeing, again, maybe that extra power tablet you need, maybe that Battle VIP pass to get your deck going. And with Arven now in the mix, we now have a third out to grabbing this on the turn that we might want it. But we also do have 2 copies of Choice Belt in the deck as well, just to increase our damage by 30 to Pokemon V. I think there is an argument where you might be able to cut one of these for the new Defiant band, but Choice Belt for the moment is still very good since I think most of the best decks are still going to be pre-rotation decks with a couple of exceptions. And speaking of damage modifiers, of course, we also have our 4 power tablets in the deck as well, just to increase the damage of our Fusion Strike Pokemon by 30. We also have 4 copies of Cross Switcher in the deck, which is a card I think a lot of decks kind of struggle to make use of because it does have that requirement where you have to play 2 of them at once. But Mew VMAX really doesn't mind this just because we do have so much draw power with our Genesect and cards like Arven and Forest Sealstone to grab the extra copy we might need in a given turn. But when we do play 2 of these, of course, we get to switch our opponent's active with one of their bench Pokemon, and then we also do have to switch. But the other reason I really do like Cross Switcher a lot in this particular build of Mew is because most turns we would prefer to play something like a Judge to disrupt our opponent's hand size instead of taking a turn off to play Boss's Orders. Another staple of Mew VMAX decks for the longest time is going to be Cram-O-Matic, and nothing has really changed. This card is still amazing in Mew after rotation, so we do have to discard an item from our hand to play it, but we flip a coin if heads, search our deck for any card. Now, whereas this would feel kind of bad in a lot of decks, even if we're flipping tails with Cram, it's still a -2 from our hand to be able to draw more cards with Genesect. We have our 4 copies of Battle VIP Pass. We can get 2 basics directly onto our bench, but we do have to play the card on turn 1. Up next from there, we have 4 copies of Ultra Ball in the deck. We have to discard 2 cards from our hand and then search our deck for any Pokemon that we want. Like I said with Cram-O-Matic, even if we're not grabbing anything with Ultra Ball, this still acts as a way to reduce our hand size to be able to keep drawing cards with Genesect. And of course, this is great at just discarding extra copies of like Battle VIP Pass or Forest Sealstones after we no longer need them. Our next new card of the deck is going to be 3 copies of the brand new Nest Ball reprint. So I will say this actually does feel a little bit worse than Quick Ball since we don't have a discard effect attached to it, but Nest Ball is still very, very good. We search our deck for a basic Pokemon and put it directly on our bench. Instead of a 4th Nest Ball, right now I'm playing a copy of Feather Ball in the deck, which I think actually does feel a good bit better. You search your deck for a Pokemon with a 0 retreat cost and put it into your hand. So not only can this grab our Mew V like Nest Ball can, but we can grab one just to thin our deck if we have a full bench. And also we can grab our Mew VMAX as well, whereas Nest Ball can't. From there, we have 2 copies of Lost Vacuum. We do have to pitch a card in our hand away into the Lost Zone, but then we send a Pokemon Tool or Stadium into the Lost Zone. So even though we do love playing Path to the Peak to disrupt our opponent, well, it is still a little bit disruptive against our own Mew VMAXs, so we do need some ways at getting rid of our path whenever we do want access to our abilities once again. We have a copy of Escape Rope in the deck to force both players to switch their active. So with the brand new Klefki from Scarlet and Violet potentially looking to be a nuisance for us, having an extra outdo forcing that Pokemon out of the active is definitely going to be good. But we're also playing a copy of Switch Cart in the deck as well, so we switch our active basic Pokemon with one of our bench Pokemon and heal 30 from the Pokemon that we switched. So you may have noticed towards the end of the Silver Tempest and Crown Zenith formats, a lot of Mew players were switching, no pun intended, to just normal Switch or extra copies of Escape Rope. I think mainly due to the different paralysis Pokemon that were popping up to counter Lugia. But with Lugia taking a pretty massive kick in the nuts after rotation, I don't think those sort of strategies are going to be popular anymore. And as a result, I definitely think going back to Switch Cart instead is going to be better. And our last trainer card is just going to be a single copy of Palpad to be able to get back 2 supporters back into our deck. And then to round out our deck list today, of course, just our 4 copies of Double Turbo Energy. We do take a 20 reduction whenever we have this attached, but it provides 2 colorless energy, and with cards like Power Tablets and Choice Belt, we can pretty easily most of the time make up for that damage reduction that it's hitting us with. So that's where I'm at right now with Mew VMAX. Quick Ball is definitely the biggest loss this deck is facing, but honestly, between Nest Ball and all of its remaining Pokemon search cards that we have, I think the engine of this deck still feels great, and I definitely think is one of the stronger contenders that we're going to have in the format for the early days of the Scarlet and Violet era. With that being said, I want to hear from you guys down below in the comment section. What do you guys think about this list? Are there any other cards you think I should have included? Let me know your full thoughts down below. But if you did enjoy today's content, as always, remember to leave a like on the video. And if you are feeling a little bit extra generous and want to take that support to the next level, you can also become a patron at patreon.com/rarecandytcg, or you can pick up some merch over at rarecandytcg.com. But as always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.